Good morning, buenos dias. Welcome to our daily webinar as part of the Hispanic Response and Recovery Plan. We have set up these daily webinars to bring you incredible speakers and people that we can learn from so that during this time we can be informed and be taking better decisions. We can be enlightened and retrain ourselves and use this time so that we can grow and upscale on the knowledge that we have, and we can be together and coordinate our actions and know best practices from different people today. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Zahira Gonzalvo. She is the Senior Vice President, Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer of Flagstar Bank. Sa, welcome today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for being a supporter of the Hispanic Response and Recovery Plan.
It is my pleasure to be here with all of you today and with you. I couldn't pass this opportunity to talk to your audience, especially as a Hispanic woman. It's my honor to be here and help in the way I can.
Fantastic. So, Sarah, we think you're a Hispanic star. We love that you're, like a Latina inside of a bank, having that title and being a senior vice president and such a representative of Latina. So we'd love to hear from you, but also we want to hear about how small businesses can plan and protect themselves during COVID-19. So we welcome you. We would love to start with a question, just personal, how, tell us a little bit about you, your story. And then I know that you have prepared something so that we can understand what cybersecurity and online risk small businesses and owners should watch out for as we move remote. This is something that we've heard this week a couple of times, cybersecurity. So we're getting it into the minds of our Hispanic leaders so that we can have it in our radar. So additionally, I know, Sarah, that you could explore recommendations for what to consider as the country reopens. So we want to start with you, Sarah. Please take it away. Tell us a little bit more about you, and then let's go through your slides and the presentation you have for us.
I started my career in Puerto Rico. I studied in the University of Puerto Rico and worked in Banco Popular in Puerto Rico. Back in the day, moved to Arthur Anderson and then moved to Michigan and worked for General Motors, Kmart Corporation, Ally Financial, and then moved to great opportunity in Flagstar Bank. We are a top 10 mortgage originator in the country, in addition to the community bank of around 150, 160 branches in the Midwest. And so I'm happy to be here. My background is in enterprise risk and technology, and now in cybersecurity. And I'm also a very, very after, and my passion is on diversity and inclusion. So I've been involved with the bank efforts on creating a diverse environment and making sure we have a great pipeline within the bank and also outside the bank, helping with STEM programs and making sure that we have good representation in the corporate environment. So that's who I am. I'm happy to be here.
That is fantastic. Such a Hispanic star. Thank you so much. Take us away. We would love to learn more about how small businesses can plan and protect themselves during COVID and about cybersecurity.
Yeah, so we've seen a real shift obviously in the last 3 months in the environment in terms of how the business operates, going into telework or remote workforce where technically was possible. There are certain businesses that by the nature of it, they cannot go on a remote basis, but for the most part, we have shifted to telework. We've seen changes in the services that were done before on premises to go online. And unfortunately, we've also seen a decrease or a cutoff on the revenue streams of some of these businesses and issues with supply chain, whether you're dependent in other suppliers to provide you with parts or supplies to conduct business. We've seen a disruption on that as well. And at the end of the day, we have a very vulnerable workforce nowadays, whether they're getting sick, whether they're worried about their health or their finances. The reality is that cyber criminals are exploiting all of that for monetary gain. They're exploiting this pandemic, and we've seen an increase on these cyber attacks for many motivations, whether it is identity theft, whether it is monetary, whether it is create a business disruption in our supply chain, or intentionally misleading people and create more confusion in this politically divisive environment that we live in. So this is why I think that businesses need to protect themselves and be able to identify scams when they see them. And I wanted to show you in the next page, I wanted to show you some of the statistics that we have, that we've seen related to COVID-19, specifically cyber threats that we're seeing right now. Mainly, you can categorize them into three things: phishing, ransomware, and scams related to COVID-19. What is the ransomware? Well, we've seen a lot of cases of companies that have been disrupted because of a virus that encrypted or blocked their critical systems or their data unless a ransom is paid. And we've seen that 20% of those ransomware victims were really small businesses. That was only in 2019. That has increased in 2020. The average size of these ransomware victims was 645 employees, and is decreasing. At the beginning of 2019, the average size of the businesses were 925. Now we are at 645. So it's getting lower and lower, that threshold. The cost will reach 20 billion, it's estimated, by 2021. And the downtime cost of that have increased 200%. Ransomware attacks have increased. We've seen 41% in 2019 alone. But how do we get into ransomware? More than likely, you get into a ransomware incident through a phishing incident, which is a form of social engineering, where it could be through an email or a malicious website or any other channel, including voicemail or even smishing, which is text in your mobile phone, where somebody is soliciting personal information or confidential information, being an imposter, through a fake email. So we have to really be careful about the phishing incidents. Organizations of 1 to 250 employees can see that 1 out of 323 emails will be malicious. That's with some of the amount of email that we receive today in organizations, that is very stagnant statistics that we see today. A lot of websites, coronavirus-related websites, have been registered since January, and I would say that 34% of those websites are malicious. They're not real. They're not providing real information. They're there to get your information. In April alone, Google reported more than 240 million spam emails related to coronavirus. And then this last one, actually, I was surprised about this one. In the last 3 weeks alone, at least 320 suspicious fake Zoom domains have been registered. So as we're doing more and more of these meetings, we have to be careful about Zoom and MS Teams and all of those tools that we use to communicate. The Federal Trade Commission related to COVID scams reported 28,000 scams in May, as of May this year, 2 or 3 days ago, with a total loss of 36.7 million and an average individual loss of $470. So it is real. We've seen scams related to the FDA CARES Act, the Payroll Protection Program, the WHO organization, and even extortion schemes when they say that your family may get infected if Bitcoin is not paid. So the threat is real, the numbers speak by itself, and I think that we really need to be aware of these things so we know how to protect ourselves. I'm going to show you some individual tips on how to identify these scams. And I know that...
Go on, this is incredible.
So how to identify a scam? And this, I put this, and I know that this may seem very basic level for a lot of people, but not for others. And you see by the metrics that I just presented that people is still falling for these scams. And so if anything, if you are a business owner and you have employees, I would send this slide to them just as an awareness to say, hey, when you're looking at your emails, make sure that you don't click on something that you don't know who's coming from. These are actual examples of COVID-related scams that we've seen. You have job postings, you have SBA fake emails from the SBA administration related to the CARES Act. You see the whole organization asking you for, to click on a link for safety measures, on even text telling you, if you click in here, I'll tell you who's been in contact with the COVID positive case. And even there on the right-hand side, this is a mobile app. It's a fake mobile app that is telling you that you can track coronavirus cases, but in reality, what it's doing is that it will encrypt your mobile phone. And unless you pay a ransom, it will not decrypt it. So some of the common patterns that you see on all of these are similar. They're scare tactics. They're asking you to act now. And they're going to scare you. Don't worry, they seldom follow through. They're going to request for personal or financial information. Always go directly to a trusted website. Don't follow any link. They will ask you to download or click on a link. If you're not expecting the email, don't click on it. It will always contain a generic greeting, or it will have a lot of grammar errors throughout the message. That's a clue. If it's not for you, just delete the email. And if they ask you to pay a ransom, never ever pay. You can call the authorities, the Secret Service, and the FBI has resources in their websites where you can report this type of scams, and they can tell you what to do if you receive a ransomware notice. I put some official COVID-19 information. By now, we all know cdc.gov and the sba.gov as actual resources that you can do rather than follow a fake email. Now, these are good, good tips for an individual to recognize a scam. Now, whether you're a business, you need to take additional measures. Those tips may not go far. It could be costly to have a cybersecurity program, but it's needed. So I would recommend that these are some of the components of a good cybersecurity program, if not all. If you do not have the money or the budget during this time to invest and make it a priority, at a minimum, you should have a customer and an employee cyber awareness program. Education is the #1 deterrent of these scams. Make it mandatory to take cyber training. There are free resources that can let you even do phishing tests for your employees where you do a simulation. There is a tool called GoPhish. It's an open source free tool that you can get in the internet, and you don't have to invest on it. There are other tools that you can pay for, but that one I've used, and it's actually pretty good. It only takes one click to be phished, so make it a priority to conduct cyber awareness training in your organization. Always keep backups, whether you're using the cloud for backups or whether you're using a more typical regular daily backups in a ransomware attack. This may be the only way to restore your operations is by using the backups. Make sure that you protect those backups and make it secure the same way you're protecting the rest of your data. Test your disaster recovery planning and make sure that if possible, you can have a cyber insurance policy to have that extra protection in case of an attack. I will continue with device protection and server protection. Encrypt your laptops, encrypt your desktops. There are antivirus software as well that is not as expensive, and you should have all of your devices encrypted and with an antivirus. You should have a patching process where you're regularly patching all of those devices and making sure that you have the latest upgrade to resolve any security issue, and you scan those devices as well periodically. You should have a data loss protection software as well. From a secure remote environment, always use a virtual private network, which is a secure tunnel to go into your network. That's very important if most of your workforce is working from home. And then make sure that you have some multi-factor authentication. That means a token or a code that is going to you in addition to your password to be able to get into your network. And protect it through less privileged access. Not every one single person in the company should have all the keys to the kingdom. People in the organization should have access based on their jobs and responsibilities. Imagine if one of the people that have all access in your company gets hacked, all of your information will be compromised. So you want to separate that access as well. Have firewalls with intrusion detection and protection software. Segment your network so you can have all critical information protected and separate from the rest. And then all the other best practices are having an email protection system, web proxy that is filtering what websites your employees are going to, and then obviously keep logs of all your activity. Make sure that in the case of an investigation or a fraud, you can go back to those logs and have additional monitoring processes around it. From a Zoom perspective, and this is the one that everyone is hearing about, we're hearing about Zoom bombing attacks, our fake Zoom domains. How do you protect them? Never click on a link that is coming from an email that you were not expecting. If you are the host of a meeting like this one, set up a waiting room, make sure that you know who's coming into that waiting room, and put a password to that meeting invite. And if you are a host, there are host controls that will allow you to, for only you to share files and not allowing anybody else to share files in the meeting. So these are some of the tips that you should consider in a remote environment and to protect your company. And I'm going to the non-security related, more on playbook considerations as we're coming from a C-19 environment and going back to work, things that you should consider. Do it on a phased approach. Whether you're following an executive order from a state or not, I think you always have to consider, is your workforce ready to come back? Evaluate the cost to return versus how much productivity you're having by working from home. Perhaps you haven't been impacted that much. People now is in a routine, they know what they need to do, and they're productive. Evaluate that versus investing money in making people safe in an on-premise location and the cost of returning. It could be a decision of whether you want to keep them for a longer term working from home or not. What I've seen as a best practice, and we've done it within Flagstar, and I've seen other companies doing it as well, they're sending surveys to the workforce on workforce readiness. Are they ready? They have different circumstances. For example, some of them may be worried about childcare or taking care of an elderly relative at home. So they may not be ready and may be hesitant to come back. So help them feel safe by letting them tell you whether they're ready or not to come back. If you decide to work from home on a longer term, make sure you have policies for productivity and protection of data. If this is going to become a longer term situation where you're keeping everybody working from home for a while, make sure you have policies inside your organization for that. Now, you decide to bring them to work, to the office, make sure you have protective equipment and that you have a policy around social distancing. Are you rotating people now versus having everybody coming at once? What are the logistics about social distancing with your customers as well? Do you have to change your workspace, or those cubicles versus shared spaces that you had before? Do you have to reconstruct and rebuild your facilities? How often are you going to be cleaning now? That's gonna become an issue. If you had a cafeteria inside the building like we do, what is your policy around that? Are you gonna keep, believe it or not, are you gonna keep the salad bar open or not for a while, right? Those are considerations that sometimes we don't think about but can have some implication in coming back. Self-reporting and contact tracing, the virus is still out there and we don't have a vaccine. If people do get sick, what are gonna be your processes as you come back? Are you gonna require employees to wear masks, and are they recommended or required for customers? And who's gonna provide them? Do you have to buy them? And as people still get sick or continue to travel, are you gonna require them to self-quarantine themselves, and what are the travel policies that may still be applicable? Then from a supply chain perspective, you have to think about, do you have enough reserves for components and parts and supplies? Do you need to look for alternate suppliers, changing your contracts, making sure you understand the hours of operations? And then the last one is one that I haven't heard a lot out there, but I think it's critical as we see a lot of issues in the news about this, is reputational risk. One is privacy issues related to employee illnesses. Right now, it seems like we want everybody to know who's getting sick so they don't get in contact with them. We need to still be aware that there are HIPAA and ADA regulations that perhaps prevent you to share some of that information to the bigger population. And then the bigger issue to me is where you are accepting customers if you own stores or buildings where customers can come in. There is a lot of issues around requiring masks or not requiring masks. And we've seen in the press where there is a big division between these. You need to be prepared to address those potential reputational issues if people do not want to wear masks and you're requiring them to do so. How do you handle that? How do you train your people to handle those situations? And I recommend you beef up your security cameras, physical security cameras, and safeguards to protect your employees in case that people protest in your building because you're requiring them to wear masks and they don't want to, or there is a fight that ensues around that. Those are things that we need to think of as we're coming back to work. And so in general, my last comment on this is we are living in a digital world. We want to go more digital in the future. Maybe this is an opportunity to work on that and expedite the digital transformation, but do it in a secure way. And that's my last comment on this presentation is think of the future, try to look at it as an opportunity to renew your processes and to become more digital.
Gonzalvo, I cannot be more grateful for this very, very educative and informative presentation, giving us tips and tricks, particularly for the Hispanic community, small businesses that are pretty not, like I'm just getting ahead of the real threat of cybersecurity. Is there anything that you, for us, for the Hispanic community, for small businesses, and thank you so very much. We will make sure that this presentation will circulate all across with all our ambassadors, all our networks, because it's important for our businesses to be protected. I really didn't know that this was such a big problem. Is there anything that you deem that is particular to the Hispanic community from this angle?
One thing, statistics that I didn't put in there, but I found is that Brazilians are more vulnerable and are more targeted. I wouldn't say vulnerable, but Brazilians are more targeted on phishing attacks than any other sector of the population for some reason. I'm not sure why, but I found that statistics very interesting. I think overall, as a Hispanic community, as we thrive with small businesses, sometimes we don't think of the bigger risk, and I think we need to, education is key. We need to look for resources to educate our community, and the same way we've spent a lot of effort in financial literacy, the same way we should be educating people in cyber literacy, because right now, that is one of the biggest risks that we have overall in the environment, especially during a pandemic, is to, now we cannot perpetrate a scam or a robbery by going physically to a bank and getting money. We do it through online and we reach a bigger audience. So I think from a Hispanic perspective, it impacts everybody, but I think Hispanic community is already more vulnerable than any other minority community during this pandemic. We've seen the statistics that you presented on how they've been impacted by COVID-19, whether they own a business or not. So more than likely, they're also going to be more vulnerable from a financial and economic side, and they probably are going to become desperate to get help and aid without really thinking or evaluating the potential risk. And so I think the more education we give to the Hispanic community during this time, the better prepared we'll be not to fall for these scams.
And the last question, I know that we're beyond the time, but it is really important. I know that some of the people in this webinar, like Edgar Carreon, that represent small businesses and have an incredible network of small businesses, we do not have the budget to have, like someone like you, and a Chief Information and Security Officer. But so can you repeat some of the resources that you think are at the minimum available and affordable for small businesses that yes or yes, C or C, we have to do?
First thing will be training, even if it's through an email to the workforce. Even if it's an email saying, this is how you recognize a scam. This is how you recognize a phishing email. That's number one. I will do it today. That doesn't take a lot of time. You can take things out of this presentation or any other free online resources. Number two, backups. Even if you're a small business, you know that you need to do a backup of your data. Doesn't take a lot of time. You don't need a CISO or a information security officer to do that. Third, encryption and antivirus software for your machines. It's not very expensive. And I think those two things should be, I would say those are the three key things that I would say if you don't have a lot of budget to invest on these that you should have.
And you mentioned GoFish.
GoFish is a training tool and it's free, and it's GoPHISH, GoFish. And you can find it online. You can download it and do some simulation with your team on phishing attacks.
I do want to thank you. I think that on the first of the 3 points that you recommended on education to all our employees, I invite you all. I invite everybody that is part of the Hispanic Star network to share this webinar with all our employees, our networks, and our children and everybody, because we have no clue where a click can lead us and actually can have devastating consequences, particularly for those households that have one laptop or one computer for everybody, that you don't have your kids or anybody touching. So the education is key, and this webinar probably is all we need to make sure that people understand it. Zahira Gonzalvo, Senior Vice President of Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer of Flagstar Bank, thank you so very much for this time.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.